Thank you, Ms. Henry. I'll ask the clerk to read item number 4.
A resolution authorizing and approving change order number 2 to the agreement by and between the City of Raytown and A&A Concrete Company for the 2013 concrete repair project, accepting all work performed under said contract and authorizing final payment in the amount of $134,330.
Mr. Noble, you seem to be our talker tonight. Do you have anything to add in our information for us?
Just the contractors completed all the work. We were here at the last board meeting asking for an increase to that project. This is an actual decrease to bring it to the final amount, just slightly below the authorized amount of $135,000. Two measures quantities. So just here to answer any other questions you may have.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, Alderman Kramer's made a motion to approve.
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Lightfoot. Is there any further discussion? If not, I would ask the clerk to call the roll.
Alderman Kramer?
Yes.
Alderman Lightfoot?
Yes.
Alderman Van Busker?
Yes.
Alderman Josh Green?
Yes.
Alderman Mock?
Yes.
Alderman Jason Green?
Yes.
Alderman Nelson?
Yes.
Alderman Asia?
Yes.
Alderman Hertz?
Yes.
Alderman Emerson?
Yes.
Item is 10-4. No one opposed. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing to consider a conditional use permit for property located near the southeast corner of Blue Ridge Boulevard and 51st Street. I would ask the city clerk to perform the second reading on item number 5.
An ordinance amending the previously approved site development plan for a planned zoning overlay district in accordance with the provisions of the comprehensive zoning regulations for the city of Raytown, Missouri.
Is there anyone on the board that would like to share any ex parte communication relative to this matter? Ms. Nelson.
I will say that the Shepherd Center of Raytown will have an office at this development, and I am on the board of the Shepherd Center of Raytown. And we'll take in consideration and reserve my final judgment until all evidence has been presented.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Lightfoot.
I have had ex parte communication, but I'll weigh all the facts and measures before I make my judgment.
Is there anyone else?
Sir, I have also had communication, and it would not affect my decision.
Thank you, Alderman Moore. I'd like to reopen the public hearing at this time. Mr. Benson, do you have any further information for the board?
Yes, I do. There is an amended ordinance before you tonight on this application. The amendment relates to the Planning Commission's recommendation that the proposed monument sign height comply with the city's sign regulations, which limit the maximum height to 5 feet. The ordinance that was before you at your last meeting did not specify that recommendation from the Planning Commission. So, other than that, I have no additional information unless you have questions for me. The applicant is here this evening. It's my understanding they don't have any additional information to present unless you have questions for them.
Okay, if the applicant does not have any additional information for us they'd like to provide, then I'd like to open the floor for public comment at this time. And for both of the ladies that signed up, was it relative to this particular one? So Catherine Nelson, if you've got the podium, please.
Catherine Nelson, 5228 Fuller Drive, Kansas City, Missouri. I'm your stormwater upset person. Number one, am I going to get more water than I do now? And number two, what rate will it get to? And then I have something for the people on Blue Ridge. the gentleman was here several meetings ago, and he said they have no water pressure, very little water pressure. Is the development gonna have good water pressure? What will this do to the people on Blue Ridge? And I know it's none of my business, but I asked at the last meeting if anyone from the developer had talked to Kansas City and shown them the plans, and I didn't get an answer. I know now that they have been contacted. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And next up is Gwen Thomas. Gwen, would you please join us at the podium?
My name is Gwen Thomas. I live at 5224 Fuller Drive, and I'm a 52-year-old disabled vet. Just to piggyback off of Kathy's question there, we're wishing that the developers would consider putting in place first, prior to the construction of the project, to put in place first the retention and the detention basin to control and to also catch those sediments and stuff that are rolling off the pavement up there, creating the excess water runoff. And make that as part of their best management practices, So we're asking for the basin to be built first prior to the construction of the project. And then during the construction of the project, as it rains and stuff like that, then that catch basin can already catch some of the sediment and stuff like that flows down in the water. And we also asked for another modification in the amount of water runoff versus the rate of speed in which the water will flow through the pipes. It seems like the slower the water flow would be, the longer it would take to drain, and then the problem is therefore prolonged. And in my own little modest way, we had envisioned like a little prototype where they have like there would be this pipe, I don't know the dimensions or anything, but it's supposed to have holes in it, and then those holes would sort of like regulate the flow at which the water, or the velocity of the water, but it still wouldn't control the amount of water. And our concern is the amount of water versus the rate at which it comes out through the tubing or the pipes. That's all I have. If they can give us some specifics on the dimensions of the pipes and the materials used and stuff like that. They said they went above and beyond on this project, so I'd like to see that as far as the nuts and bolts.
Thank you for your comments. Would our Director of Development and Public Affairs or the applicant wish to speak to any of the questions that were brought up in public comment?
I'm going to defer to the applicant's engineer to address those questions.
Kevin Mikowski with Clawback Engineering, 14700 West 114th Terrace, Lenexa, Kansas. I did speak with a representative from the city of Kansas City, Missouri today, and we talked about some of the questions that he had about our stormwater study as well as the stormwater design. And we did talk about the rate that water leaves the site and the duration that the water leaves the site. And without getting into a technical conversation about what we do, we are increasing the amount of water that leaves the site because we are putting in asphalt pavements and sidewalks and roofs. So by the very nature of development, we are increasing the total quantity of water leaving the site. What we have done with the design that we have right now is we are reducing the rate at which water leaves the site right now. And the way that we are doing that is essentially letting water build up in the detention basin and releasing it through a restricted pipe, if you will. There was mention made of the outlet structure that we have designed, and it's fairly complicated to describe. But I will say that the city has all of the plans and all of our stormwater studies available for any residents to review and see the design that we have. But there is a standpipe that has a series of holes drilled in the side of it, so as water rises up on that standpipe, water comes into those holes, into more of those holes, so the rate of discharge increases. So, using general numbers as an example, let's say, for example, that all of the water, the rainwater that hits the site now is a grass field. During a heavy storm, it leaves that site at about 48 cubic feet per second. That's a lot of water rushing off the site. And the city's design standard is that we have to reduce that rate, and we have taken it down to around 30 cubic feet per second during a heavy rain. And in the discussions, and what happens is, because we are restricting the pipe, we're making a smaller garden hose, if you will, for water to leave. That means it takes longer for the amount of water to leave the site. And then the woman who spoke was correct in that statement. So the water that is going through the neighbors' yards, it's a smaller rate of water, but it runs for a longer period of time because there's a big reservoir of water to drain. And the discussion with the representative from the city of Kansas City, Missouri, was that maybe instead of reducing it from 48 to 30, which is a significant reduction, maybe reduce it from 48 to 40 or 48 to 38. Thereby, we're still meeting the city of Raytown requirements by reducing the rate that water leaves the site, but we're also then reducing the duration from what we have designed now. And we are certainly willing to consider those design changes. They're fairly minor modifications that we will discuss with our client. I do want to reiterate that we have complied with the city of Raytown requirements, and our stormwater study has been accepted by the city, and we would be willing to consider some of these stormwater design changes to cooperate with some of the neighbors. There was a question about putting the detention basin in first at the beginning of construction. This was another conversation held with the city of Kansas City, Missouri representative, dealing with erosion control. And if we can dig out the detention basin at the beginning of the construction project and divert as much of the runoff from the site to that basin as we can, then that would significantly reduce the potential for off-site erosion. And again, we are certainly willing to discuss that with our client, as well as a contractor who is on board to implement that strategy for mitigating potential erosion problems. So I believe there's a question about water pressure. We have been told by the Raytown Water Company that there's sufficient pressure within the main that we are tapping to provide pressure for our development. And so I would assume that they also have sufficient pressure to provide water service for the rest of their customers. That is all I have.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone on the board that has any questions for the applicant? Mr. Rainbow. I think Mr. Lightfoot.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Is it a typical process to dig that storm basin as the resident spoke to, and then you kind of talk? Is that something that you generally would do first to catch the new runoff during construction?
Every site is different, and reducing the erosion, off-site erosion potential is very important, and whether that means there are lots of different ways that you can do that, and digging the detention basin is one of the strategies that you can use. Another strategy is to take some of the trees that have been cleared on the site and shipped them up into mulch and just dump piles of mulch on the property line to mitigate, to filter any water that runs offside. There are also just standard erosion control measures using silt fence, using hay bales or silt dikes or anything like that. So it's not typical, but it's certainly done, it can be done to dig out the detention basin as part of the overall erosion control strategies used for this project.
It seems like that's something that's going to be done one way or the other, one time or another, so, maybe that would be a good strategy to do that first. But interesting, I hadn't thought of that. Thank you.
Mr. Kramer?
I don't know if it's relevant or not, but with this detention basin and reducing the flow, the output, on your calculations, what type of rain event would it take to exceed that detention basin?
All of our calculations that we have run up to and including that 100-year storm event hold the all of the runoff from that storm event. So the 100-year storm event is the most severe storm event that's used in typical engineering practice for stormwater designs, and we completely detain that within our basin without overtopping the berm.
Okay. Thanks for your answer.
Alderman Hurst?
Thank you. In my tenure on the board for the last 15 years, I think our most difficult war or problem has been stormwater. And I can't tell you how many 100-year rains Public Works has said that we've had in the last 15 years, but it's been more than 2 or 3. Those 100-year rains, along with long streams of water that occur over long periods of time, they go through a lot of neighborhoods, especially my ward. They create erosion to property. Even when that erosion is given to the city as public right-of-way, we don't address them. Not counting the possible personal property damage that takes place, we do have citizens that get personal property damage on a regular basis. And the policy of the city, not my policy, it's my policy by the end of the vote because we support majority rule, but we have $0 for stormwater. That's our position. We will not address future projects in any way. That's what our next budget is going to say. And so that means that once we build it or allowed to be built by anybody, it's not our responsibility, it's the citizens' responsibility. It's theirs to keep, because we're not going to address it. Today is our responsibility, it's this board's responsibility to make sure that whatever project goes in, it has to work. And I will tell you that we have projects in the city that don't work very well. Now, I'm not an engineer, and I was just a school teacher, a coach. But I am a citizen, I'm a property owner, and I have constituents, I've been to the yards and I've seen them. And I don't know, Mr. Benson, I know when we addressed this project a few years ago, when they were going to build, I think, an alternate project, Kansas City had some open meetings, they addressed stormwater. Have they done that?
Kansas City, at the previous project, Kansas City did not have any open meetings. There was a meeting, I believe it was at Ms. Nelson's house, myself, Jason Hanson, the city engineer, along with, I believe, Ms. Nelson, I forget the council member from Kansas City, that was at Becky Nates, thank you, and then some staff from the city of Kansas City were at that meeting. They were proposing a detention basin just as this one is. The size of that detention basin would not hold the volume of water that this detention basin is proposing to hold. The difference in between the excuse me, the difference between the two, besides the volume of water the detention basin would hold, the previous development was going to pipe this storm water from the detention basin between the homes and discharge actually across Fuller Street to the south between two more homes and then discharge into a creek. That's located to the rear of those homes. So that was the difference in this case. That met the city standards. This project, as Mr. Pinkowski said, meets our city standards as well. They're just taking a different approach to detaining the water by holding back more water and then releasing it over a longer period of time, where the other project was not going to hold it back as long and would just discharge it through a pipe, basically. So that's fundamentally, that's the difference between the two projects.
All right, I'm going to go back to my original statement. Water running over a long period of time creates erosion. That belongs to the property owner to deal with. I guess, you know, I have spoken more than any other alderman. In fact, I can't remember any alderman I've heard support me on this, about addressing stormwater. And maybe I would like to see that when we go into contracts and we vote on something, that we give our citizens a 3-year warning. That if a stormwater project doesn't work, begins to cause erosion or property damage, that the city has to go back at their expense and fix it. That would make us a lot more self-conscious about our projects or how we oversee projects to make sure they're put in right. So what we do put in doesn't become a sore spot for our citizens that we can't address.
Is there anyone else? Mr. Vaughn?
I'd get back before starting construction with the erosion control itself. I know we've only developed and built for a very short time, but it seems like any type of development that we've been into, we've always had basin in first. Maybe not grassy growing or anything like that, but we've always had basin first, erosion control all in to help the neighbors. You know, I know there's a huge concern of a lot of neighbors before you start developing this and that, and I'd like to see that done if you possibly could. Thank you.
Mr. Sturgeon?
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying there as well. You may not have put the detention pond in first. You were going to put in some type of erosion control because obviously if you're constructing next to these neighbors, you're liable for damage that would occur to the property.
We have a phase, on the construction plan that was submitted, we have a phased erosion control plan that has been submitted.
And you're bonded and the construction company that does this job.
The erosion controls is ultimately the responsibility of the contractor. And you know, we design what we think the erosion control should be as an engineer, and it's clearly stated on the plans that if there are additional erosion control measures that you, Mr. Contractor, see necessary, then you're responsible for installing those. So if the erosion control that we design is overpowered by a storm, or for whatever reason is insufficient, then it's incumbent on the contractor to take additional measures. The discussion about performing the detention basin construction on the front end of the project is certainly right, and as I said before, we'll be happy to consider that as an option, discussing with the developer and the contractor.
Yeah, but at any event, whether it's there or not, you're still going to do the same effect that detention pond would do. It's just not going to go in either way. That's what you're saying.
That is correct.
And then as far as construction warranties, are these much like the city, Mr. Benson, where streets do have a warranty when they do work? I believe we get 2 years. Is that correct?
That's correct. And that is, going back to Mr. Ager's comment a moment ago, that would apply also to the detention basin structure. So
that's what I
know. So it's a 2-year maintenance period. In that 2-year period, or any time during that 2-year period, if there's a problem, that maintenance period, so we can go back to the developer, have them fix any problems that may arise.
So if we get our semi-annual 100-year range, we can test that out.
That's
I hope not.
But thank you, I think I'm pretty clear about that.
Anyone else have any questions? If not, I'd like to close the public participation portion of this public hearing. Okay, I'm sorry, I missed you. I will close it, Chad, there. Jason Green.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I appreciate it. I guess this question may be more for our city attorney in regards to this. Is there any way we can stipulate with approval of this conditional use permit that the basin would be complete first, I guess for lack of a better term? You put a condition upon the approval of this?
It would appear to be a condition you can authorize, yes.
Okay. Well, I would, I guess, motion to amend the proposal to add such where the basin has to be complete in regards to passing the conditional use permit.
I guess I would like to clarify what does complete mean.
I'm basing what I'm mentioning here on the conversation that I think it was Mr. Alderman Hertz or Mock, maybe I forget which one brought this up. So that way we can ensure that there's not, I guess, a semi-annual 100-year storm or rainfall, if you will, to ensure that there's limited erosion. What I'm getting at is I'd like to see something like that put in place and prior to the rest of the development.
And I understand that, but complete is not clearly defined. Does that just mean we dig a hole in the ground and so that water can run into it? I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but
No, you're fine. I guess my concern is I'd like to see some attention paid to that prior to this running along. A lot of folks have complained about such. Mr. Asia brought up earlier, folks, we have some projects here that have created some erosion problems, and I'd like to see a condition within this conditional use permit ensuring that the basin is effective and it's working appropriately.
We actually have a motion for an amendment on the floor. Is there a second to that amendment? There's no second? If there's I'm sorry?
I'll second.
You will second it? Okay. We have
I think this word says it.
an amendment to the ordinance by Mr. Jason Green, seconded by Mr. Mock. Would you like to restate exactly what your amendment says?
Yeah, sure. What I'd like to see is maybe construction on the basin begin prior, if possible, to before the actual, I guess, site plan begins. This is an area of concern that members of the board brought up, members of the community brought up, and if at all possible, without stipulating the project, I'd like to see that take place.
can I just address that?
We are still in public hearing portion, so yes, you can address that.
Part of the construction of the basin includes not only digging, but also filling. And then there's enough fill to be placed that we can't place all the fill by just from the excavation of the basin. So we would have to get that fill from other places on site. So you asked that it be filled before we start working on the rest of the site, but we can't do that. We have to essentially just clear part of the site and start excavation in order to create the fill. In order to generate the fill, we need to make that the berm that creates the basin.
Okay, other discussion? Mr. Asia?
it kind of seems like it's painting a wall from the bottom up as opposed to the top down. And in your original dialogue, you were talking about, and I didn't even understand it, I'm not an engineer. When you say you build sidewalks and curb, you're gonna have less water. I don't think you're gonna have less water, you're gonna have less class, you know. But the question of where it goes has handle. And this is what's so difficult for an alderman to understand, and we put all our faith in our public works, because they understand it maybe better than we do, even though they, in the past, they have made mistakes. And it's difficult, even like in a 2-year plan. We just say, well, we're gonna test it for 2 years, we should be able to go back. You know, we just got out of a 3-year drought, so 2 years may not be enough. I don't think the answer is necessarily putting the water basin in first, because you're not going to really see how it all works until you get it all built. At least that's the way it seems to me. And I was going to ask Andy Knowles if he wanted to respond to that. He is a public works director, and
Mr. Knowles,
maybe give us a little shed a little light on.
would you like to address this?
Yes, to address the issue of the stormwater detention basin being utilized to help with the erosion control, I think it's something that can be incorporated at the beginning of the project, and a requirement such that can be placed in the stormwater pollution prevention plan that they're required to have on site as a phase of the erosion control. So I don't think it's not an unnecessary burden for the project to start with that project, with completing the stormwater detention basin, utilizing it as a sediment basin as they go forward. Then once most of the construction is done and the area is stabilized, we can transfer it from a temporary sediment control basin to a long-term stormwater detention basin as well.
How much added expense will that cost to build this one up? Is it more will it?
I don't know the exact expense off the top of my head without going through it. I don't think it's a significant expense, but it will cost some more funds because we'll take more rocks and more erosion control fabric, some of that, and then also moving the sediment from the bottom of the basin after the construction is completed and they're able to put final stabilization of the area so we get grass to where they want it, final grade. That's some of the extra steps that they would have to go through.
And this is a new conversation with respect to the contractor's phasing of the project. This was, not part of the original discussions held. So you asked a question about price increase, and I can't tell you that. We'd have to go back and talk to our contractor to see what that burden would be when you're talking about building this on the front end. As Andy mentioned, there's additional construction. Just because you dig a hole on the site doesn't mean all the water's going to run to it. Excuse me. There will be, a significant amount of berming that will have to be done in order to direct the site water to the site runoff to that basin. Because, most of you have seen the site, it's at the southeast corner of the site, and the site generally drains to the southwest. So we'll have to redirect that runoff to the pond, to the basin, excuse me. And that has to be done with some sort of berm or some sort of construction technique that was not part of the original contract that was drafted with the contractor.
And it's also, he's correct, there's many methods that can be employed to prevent the erosion, and sedimentation downstream, and this is just one of the many various ways that they can accomplish that. So there's, like I said, you can use mulch, you can use silt-fence, you can use berms, you can use many very different ways, and it depends on how much area, how much water is going to that specific area. This is just another tool that is available to them to complete that project, and it's a requirement of any project that they have erosion control established and prevent sediment from running off-site, and that's part of their stormwater permit that will receive from the state as well. So it's not just us, it's also a state level department.
Thank you, I just have one question. Is it possible to extend that 2-year requirement to 3 years, or that's set in stone?
I think it's in the ordinance, and I don't think it's necessary at that point to, because it won't finish, the project's gonna actually complete until the grass is stabilized in the bottom of the basin. So if you have a 2-year drought, the grass won't be stabilized, so it's not technically complete. So and it's 2 years from the date it's actually technically complete.
So that can't be changed, or it's not necessary to change it?
I think it's both. I don't think it's necessary, I don't think it's in the ordinance that it's a 2-year, bonding requirement.
So they can't be amended?
Well, anything can be amended, but I think the current ordinance is at 2 years.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Richardson.
What I'm hearing though is that by this motion is we're limiting him to only one way of stopping the erosion, where they said they could now use multiple ways, some of which may be better than the stormwater retention pond.
We would limit ourselves to only the detention basin, even if that was a stipulation.
Okay, and word that being what you're saying, because there's so many, you already stated you're responsible for the stormwater running off that property during construction and through a variety of methods. I agree with the idea that you're going to probably build the summit as you go, when the line is level. And I guess I definitely don't have a problem with it. I like the idea of it, but I'm unclear as to the degree of finish and our expertise as aldermen into an engineer's job here. But I'm a little worried, concerned that I don't want to be tying anybody's hands when making things worse instead of better.
Mr. Frazier?
Yeah, I have a question. I know the stormwater basin is on 67th Street, I believe it's already, works pretty well. But the water that leaves that basin leads to a pipe underground, goes under the street, and is empty on the other side of the street. And my question would be, when the water leaves the stormwater basin, will it come directly out the bottom of the basin and travel over land, across their property, or under the ground in a pipe?
The stormwater comes out of the basin through a pipe and dumps immediately into what's called a silting basin or a leveling basin. And that, the purpose of that is to spread out the discharge over a berm, if you will, as opposed to through a pipe. And as you can imagine, the pipe creates a lot more erosion that you were talking about. When it's spilled over a berm, it's much more gentle and natural on the surrounding grades. So when it leaves the detention structure in its entirety, it will be flowing, discharging over land via the berm that has been stabilized without certain enforcement measures. And then once it leaves that berm, it goes to we're not changing the grades at the property line. So looking at the current grades, it looks like there's a small funnel effect as it exists right now, and it will travel in that same general direction. Just off of our site to the south, onto one of the adjacent properties, I believe there is some sort of inlet structure, some sort of buried inlet structure that captures some amount of water. We did not include that in any of our hydraulic analysis, so I don't know how much water it can take, but just by the nature of all the discussions that we've had through these meetings, I would assume that it does not take much. So some of the water that leaves our site gets into that pipe, and some amount of it does not.
Then I'm just trying to follow this. So it sounds like you're saying that water will escape over the top of the berm, and when it stops escaping, everything on the other side is going to stay. You'll have a pool of water.
Yeah, apparently I'm not.
There was a picture of that.
Engineers aren't known for their communication skills. So we have our large detention basin, there's a discharge pipe that goes out of that detention basin, and that pipe goes into a sealing basin. So, and that sealing basin is not very deep. It just serves to capture all the water that comes out of that pipe and slow it down and spread out the discharge of it. So there will be some amount of water that stands after the detention basin has drained, but it will be a small enough amount that it will percolate down to the ground, in a short period of time.
And it would be short enough, you wouldn't have like mosquitoes.
So that's correct.
Anyone else? Mr. Kramer?
Mr. Nolan, in your professional opinion, and of course this gentleman is extremely qualified, but we know you well. In your professional opinion, can erosion control take place adequately without demanding the construction of this detention basin through other methods to this project?
Yes, I do believe they can address erosion control with any of those tools that are available to them to adequately address the erosion that may take place on that site. So
What are the parts of the detention basin, correct?
correct.
Okay. Well, I myself would not support this motion. I appreciate the zealousness of Mr. Green in trying to get back this project. However, as a layperson, as an alderman without an engineering degree, I don't see where I would exercise any expertise that would exceed what these gentlemen have, so I will not support this motion.
Mr. Joshua?
I would just like to say, first of all, I have one question here. Is it true, you said that during the construction period of the developments, that they are responsible for runoff that occurred during construction? Yes. All right, I would agree with Mr. Kramer that, I feel like this is the case where government's coming in and telling someone how to do their job, and honestly, I feel like there's a lot of people here that aren't engineers, so I think that if we tell them we have to build this detention basin beforehand, that we aren't necessarily taking we're getting involved where maybe it's not our best place to be.
Mr. Mott?
We'll be looking at basically going towards, halfway point of construction, the end of it.
It's part of the general grading process of the job site, which is the very first thing that's done.
It's part of the grading of the job site.
Yes. So, it may not be the very first task of the contractor to complete the berms and make sure that it is complete, but it is part of the first phase of the project of the grading.
Mr. Jason Green?
After hearing additional wealth of information concerning all this, I guess I would like to make a motion to nullify my motion or rescind my motion. Yeah, withdraw the amendment. I would like to say though, in regards to, there is a role for government though when it comes to these type of projects, make sure that people's properties are protected. And that was the whole point of this conversation. But I think it's very beneficial and good to ensure that the folks in the surrounding communities, surrounding neighborhoods aren't experiencing, erosion and such due to a particular development. That was my concern. But thank you for clarifying, and Mr. Nolan, I appreciate your responses as well.
Thank you. Mr. Mott, are you withdrawing your second as well? Okay. Mr. Benson?
Just add on to what Mr. Alderman Green just spoke about, just a point of clarification on when they submitted their plans, which are included in the plans you see for this, your last meeting on this application, they are required, they along with any other developer are required to submit a road sediment control plan, which they've done. And that's intended to do exactly what Mr. Green describes. When they start grading on the site, they have to have those erosion control measures in place. And as they move along with the grade, those erosion control measures evolve depending on as the project evolves. Our building official, as well as the environmental inspector, as they're out doing inspections, part of their duties is to make sure that those erosion control measures are maintained and kept in place. So that if heavy rain does occur, that they can be once they're given the green light to start construction, that there's no oversight, or, nobody's watching about the erosion control, that doesn't occur, so.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Thank you, sir. I'll close the public participation portion of the hearing at this time. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Ager had a motion to approve, seconded by Ms. Nelson. Is there any other discussion related to this matter? I would just mention, in my neighborhood, we have 3 projects that are very similar to this, Jessica Estates. And they have been a tremendous fit for our neighborhood, for West Ridge Hills subdivision. It's just been a real delight to have them as neighbors. And I think everyone that will be neighbors to this project will end up liking it and having a good neighborhood close to it. So we have a motion and a second. I would ask the clerk to call the roll.
Alderman Asia?
Yes.
Alderman Nelson?
Yes.
Alderman Emerson?
Yes.
Alderman Kramer?
Yes.
Alderman Earth?
Yes.
Alderman Jason Green?
Yes.
Alderman Josh Green?
Yes.
Alderman Van Hester?
Yes.
Alderman Lightfoot?
Yes.
Alderman Mock?
Yes.
Okay, 2 yeses, no no's. Would ask the city clerk to perform the second reading on item number 6.
In order to bring approval of the final plat of Willows and Rose subdivision of the city of Raytown, Jackson County, Missouri.
Mr. Benson, do you have any additional information to add?
This, as was discussed at the last meeting, this is the tying of the same property as one lot. There is a public access easement which will, where the drive through the property will be constructed. There are also public easements being dedicated for storm drainage, a portion of the storm drainage system, which will be publicly owned, which will include the detention basin, though the detention basin will be privately maintained by the developer. A reminder that, as we discussed at last week, the detention basin doesn't serve just this property, but it serves 2 adjacent properties to the north of this property, which are upstream, if you will, uphill. So, with that, we have to answer any questions.
Any discussion, Ms. Nelson?
First off, this is the second reading, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is that first reading of the green sheet?
On the RDA.
Pardon?
On the RDA.
I would make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve by Ms. Nelson, a second by Mr. Kramer. Is there any further discussion? If not, I would ask the clerk to call the roll.
Alderman Nelson?
Yes.
Alderman Kramer?
Yes.
Alderman Earth?
Yes.
Alderman Jason Green?
Yes.
Alderman Van Hester?
Yes.
Alderman Emerson?
Yes.
Alderman Josh Green?
Yes.
Alderman Asia?
Yes.
Alderman Mock?
Yes.
Alderman Lightfoot?
Yes.
I'll read it for 10 yeses, 0 no's. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing to consider Chapter 353 tax abatement for a property located at 6200 Blue Ridge Boulevard. I would ask the city clerk to perform the second reading on item number 7.
An ordinance adopting and approving the 6th amended development plan submitted by the Raytown Municipal Redevelopment Corporation, establishing a declaration of the redevelopment area described within the 6th Amendment development plan is a blighted area in new development and redevelopment, and authorizing certain tax abatements within the redevelopment area described within the 6th Amendment development plan.
Is there anyone on the board who would like to share any ex parte communication at this time related to this matter? Mr.
I do sit on the 353 development could be, I believe. I'll weigh all information I learned from that and this in my decision.
Anyone else? I'd like to open the, okay, Ms. Mills?
I am also on the 353 tax abatement committee, and will take everything into consideration and reserve my right to judgment until all evidence is presented.
Thank you. I'd like to open the public hearing at this time. Mr. Benson, do you have any information for the board on this application that you haven't given us?
I have no additional information for you that you didn't previously in your last meeting. The applicants are here this evening as well. Prior to the meeting, they indicated to me they had no additional information to provide as well, so we'll be happy to answer your questions.
And the applicants do not want to address this time.
Yeah, they'll be happy to answer your questions, but they have no additional information to present.
I'd like to open the floor for public comment at this time. Is there anyone, I don't believe there's someone signed up to address this. So it's time for board discussion related to this. If you have any questions for Mr. Benson or questions for the applicant, now's the time to ask those questions.
I understand that this tax abatement is for 10 years, is this correct?
That is correct. 10 years or until the cost of the improvements are paid off, whichever would occur first.
Whichever would occur first. All right, thank you.
I have a couple of questions for the applicant, if you can come forward, please, to the podium. Either one or both. She gets to do it. Out of curiosity, I'd like to know a little bit about the type of business you have planned, and maybe the hours for the business, and just tell us a little bit about it, if you will.
Actually, what we're going to do is, it's going to be a breakfast and lunch. Actually, that's our plan, starting out breakfast and lunch. My husband just retired from the police department, so he has a little bit more time than I do. And then basically, we're kind of really just looking to do breakfast and lunch right now. Future plans, maybe in the next year or two, we're wanting to kind of do something maybe Thursday through Sunday night, something similar to getting people in the community that has certain types of talent, such as over in Kansas, because my boss, he lives over there, his son is in the high school band or whatever, and so they have a local bar there that supports the high school students, and their parents come out and watch them and all that, and they get a really good turnout, you know. And, you know, just different things like maybe jazz or poetry, kind of bringing the arts to the area.
Good, I like lunch and breakfast. So your hour is then to be,
Right now, for breakfast and lunch, my husband was looking at maybe 6 a.m. For breakfast, you know, to catch people early, and possibly catch high school kids also. And then lunch would probably end at about 1:30.
I noticed you were in the military.
Yes.
Thank you for your service. Anyone else have any questions for the applicant? Mr. Lightfoot?
Well, mine isn't really a question for the applicant, but it's just it's just kind of a comment on, I think this is a good example of what the 353 is actually there for, and particularly I like to see it help a small business come to town, and everybody asks for more restaurants, and it sounds like a good plan. I read over your plan. And I just wanted to comment that I think this type of 353 abatement is, you know, really designed around this kind of small business, so I support it.
Anything else?
I also agree that I think this is a good plan for the 353 tax abatement, because this has been a property that's been vacant for many years. And I would like to see it come to an active participation, as you say, for the community and those supporting it.
Anyone else?
Let's come up with Newsroom Cafe.
We went back and forth. He wanted to use some of his name and I was going to use some of my name. And I don't remember exactly. Was it something that just popped in my head as usual? Something just pops in my head. It does.
Well, I guess I can speak on this a little bit. We kind of came with the newsroom cafe concept. A lot of people come to the small cafes and like to talk about, tell what's going on in the news, what happened in the days. And so that's kind of what the concept is about. So, you know, you come in the morning after jogging, you talk to your buddy about what's happening. I'm probably about news things, old news articles about, you know, people come on there, a little bit about history and stuff like that. So that's kind of the concept.
And I just moved to CNN or maybe something different instead of using the ass.
Any other questions? Mr. Jason Green.
I'm just curious, when you guys plan on, I guess obviously the construction needs to take place in summer, which I'm excited to see, but when you guys actually plan on opening your doors?
As soon as we get approved, we're gonna be
Ready to go.
get everything lined up, But I'm looking maybe October, maybe, but I don't know if it's exactly the right way. I don't know if it's halfway through that, so.
I think it's a great location. I think you're going to get some business in the last weeks.
I hope so, and we hope, like I said, we're gonna try our best to do Raytown Board, and like I said, we just wanna try to make it happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know whether it's appropriate for me to make suggestions. I haven't been a former teacher and history teacher in a little bit, not very much, a little bit involved with Raytown Historical Society. Are you from Raytown originally? Do you know much about our historical society?
I moved here in '95. I live here now in Raytown.
I think that they would be totally interested in sharing what they have, and you can copy things. I mean, it's a great wealth of Raytown history. If you're looking for wall pictures and previous history, there's a lot of things people don't know about this community that you could learn from the historical society that you could put on a wall that would draw people into it. We want to see you be successful, not just do a little bit of business, but stay in business for a long time.
Appreciate that, thank you very much.
If I could
That's
ask
the
you,
goal, like I said, we're gonna, the historical society, I will be going there and seeing about some hundreds and stuff, people that actually take an interest in, read where it's at.
do you know where it is?
Oh, yeah.
Across from Wendy's.
Mr. Mott.
Thank you, Mr. Ridge, for mentioning that. Is this still Blue Jay Barber Shop?
Yes.
Anybody hear that? Blue Jay Barber Shop?
Yeah, I heard about that, Blue Jay Barber Shop.
You can see what it did for Mr. Mott.
Oh, man, that's too water. You guys are okay, Mr. Josh Green.
Bringing it a little more serious now, I do just want to agree with a few other voices out there that this is exactly what the 353 is built for. It's promoting small business growth, and I'm happy to support this.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate you coming forward. I'd like to close the public participation portion of the hearing at this time. Go ahead and have a seat. Thank you. And would entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
Right. Mr. Lightfoot, I believe you pressed your button.
Yes, sir, I was going to motion to approve.
I will recognize you with the motion. Is there a second? Second. Mr. Josh Green has a second. I'd ask the city clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Lightfoot.
Yes.
Alderman Josh Green.
Yes.
Alderman Knox.
Yes.
Alderman Nelson.
Yes.
Alderman Jason Green.
Yes.
Alderman Van Busker.
Yes.
Alderman Kramer.
Yes.
Alderman Asher.
Yes.
Alderman Emerson.
Yes.
Alderman Ernst.
Yes.
I believe everyone voted in the affirmative.